Good morning and good afternoon, everybody. I'm Andrew Keane from CRU's Consulting Division. It's my great pleasure to welcome back our excellent presenters this morning back for a panel discussion on the topic of creating a competitive edge through environmental excellence. Now, it's quite clear that environmental excellence has moved from something that was nice to have to something that is now a key determinant of competitive advantage in various parts of the value chain. It's also been interesting to watch it in recent years move from a debate in the capital markets and how capital is allocated there. Now it's quite firmly what we're seeing from right across the industry, a key thing in the capital allocation debate within the industry itself. And I would imagine it's probably a significant determinant of the time allocation amongst CEOs and senior management as well. Now, there are a few common themes out of the presentations this morning and some of the discussions also in the earlier group panels that I'd like to explore with our group here. The first of these is on carbon, naturally, and energy efficiency. The need to reduce CO2 and decarbonise is now largely a settled consensus. And it's one where really the industry should be seeking collaboration and partnerships. So I'm going to direct my first question to Simon Yakub from Worley. Simon, can you talk about how Worley is tackling the issue of decarbonisation? Where are the easy entry points? Where are the timeframes for measurable outcomes?
Yeah, thanks, Andrew, and a pleasure to be with everybody today. It's a good question, and I guess we look at it in terms of two different levels or two different strata. The first of which is effectively treating decarbonisation now. One of the techniques we apply quite successfully at the moment is the displacement of diesel from existing operations. So it's very much leaning towards open cast mines. Underground mines, I think, have a different footprint intrinsically, but the approach is really to evaluate and I guess the analysis, first of all, is when we stand back and look at the carbon footprints as they stand for open cast mining, the single biggest contributor, or certainly a significant contributor, is the consumption of diesel. If I refer to some examples that we have with some of our tier one miners where they've got open cast portfolios, some are spending up to $1 billion a year to buy 1 billion litres of diesel, which they consume each and every year. So the approach that we take is one of horizons in terms of how we displace diesel. The first move and the most obvious is how you can reduce the immediate demand. Some of that's as simple as changing out fleet, going from a conventional diesel to a diesel electric, and then it gets obviously more sophisticated as you move down the chain. So things such as trolley assist, things such as battery electric vehicles, and ultimately when we get into the third horizon as we define it, we're starting to talk about the complete elimination of diesel, which comes from either electrons or in some cases hydrogen. And we're already seeing movements towards that. So that's diesel displacement. It's achievable. I think as an industry, we're focused there because it's low-hanging fruit in terms of reduction of that carbon footprint. I think the second and probably the more exciting one for us is how we transform some of the metals value chains from where they are right now to potentially what they might look like in a future scenario. And to me, the case in point is Chile, where we obviously are with Crew at the moment, where if you look at the market right now, Chile exports a significant amount, if not the majority of its copper in concentrate. And you can imagine what a world starts to look like when you have the confluence of renewable energy sources. Here it's sun, hydro, and wind in the south. And what those green electrons can be used, and it might be a case of green hydrogen, green ammonia, or simply green electrons, when you start to value create finished products in a location. It's a transformative effect on an economy for Chile, say, where it's not just shipping out concentrate, but it's producing refined or in some cases finished metal products, which it can take to the world. Chile right now is a net importer of energy. You can imagine the transformative effect, as I mentioned, of what that looks like when it starts. It could be a net exporter of energy, or certainly of green credentialed products that are true and traceable when it comes to base metals. And it goes to your point, Andrew, about what the world is, the expectations of the world as we move forwards. Thanks.
Thanks for that. It's very interesting. I'm going to pick up on your issue of efficiency and direct a question to John Stanton, CEO of Weir. I mean, John, in your presentation, you talked about demand that you're seeing for things like high pressure grinding rolls and the willingness to invest in energy saving solutions by different commodities. Can you talk about what you're seeing in copper and maybe what you're seeing in other metals as well?
Yeah, hi, thanks, Andrew. Hi, everybody. Yeah, we're getting a lot of interest in our high pressure grinding rolls at the moment, and it's across all commodities, including copper, iron ore, gold, because whatever the commodity, our customers are clearly looking for solutions that are going to help reduce their CO2 consumption. And we're sort of focused on high pressure grinding rolls because it can offer it in two ways. I guess, first of all, if you think about energy consumption, high pressure grinding rolls can be 40% more energy efficient, so using less energy. Simon talked about diesel. Electricity to run the combination circuits is the second sort of highest CO2 footprint across a mine site. So it's a product that offers lower energy consumption, but also because of the nature of the process, there's essentially a lower embedded footprint. So essentially the sort of scope 3 CO2 that our customers are very focused on at the moment in terms of trying to understand. And that's because obviously it eliminates the use for grinding media through the roll process. And therefore, you haven't got all of the embedded CO2 that comes through in that grinding media, and you're not getting contamination of the product as well. So that also clearly helps downstream in terms of leading to better recoveries for our customers. And of course, it also has the benefit, I know we'll go on to talk about water later, but it also has the benefit of being a dry process. So back to your original question, yeah, I think it sort of ticks all the boxes in terms of assisting our customers on the journey to reduce CO2 consumption, and can be applicable for copper as all of the other minerals that we help to produce. And finally, I would say, it's a product that is really a win-win, because it's the kind of innovation that I think is setting the standard for the industry. And our focus is absolutely now on those kind of innovations that are going to help our customers reduce CO2 footprint further.
It's excellent. I'm going to move on a little bit from carbon, because we can come back to it, but it is a topic that I know that we could spend an hour on in its own right. I'm going to move on to water at the moment, which is a big issue in Chile, and it's a big issue globally as well. I'm going to direct a question to Thomas Schultz, CEO of FLSmidth. Thomas, what are the main challenges you're hearing from customers, and how do you see the short and long-term solutions to better water management in mining?
Yeah, thanks for the question. At first, water is all over debated, and it got before the availability and the cost. It's today the risk of negative marketing. If you utilize water too much in an area where not enough water is available for people to live, or you intoxicate water, which then at the end gets into the drink water. So water is a completely different level of importance for the mining industry than it was several years ago. We in FLSmidth, we look into the productivity improvement, and that for decades. And we changed that into sustainability improvement, because that covers, especially in water, both areas. On one side, the cost, on the other side, the risk, and not to forget the opportunities with it. So water is a big resource, and there are several ways to handle it. From our point of view, new technologies are necessary in a world where the ore grades are depleting quite constantly and quite significantly. I always take that example out of my own career. When I started to study mining in the 80s, we had 4.5% copper deposits. Today, maybe 0.4, 0.5. but the consumption, thanks God, the consumption really went up and will go up further with the sustainability. So water is a very important resource, a very important subject. So what to do with it? First thing is to avoid water utilization. And that is possible over new leaching possibilities like the ROL or other methods. And the other part is to minimize the water utilization, which means simply to use digitalization, artificial intelligence, new way of products, new way of working to reduce each cubic of water, what you can, up to the level that you recycle it with new filtration technologies like for tailings management and so on. The demand on us regarding water and water-related equipment, processes, services is significantly higher. We calculate it's up to 10 times higher than it was 6-7 years ago from the demand from the customer side. You see the importance of water in all areas significantly increased.
It's really interesting what you say, particularly the comment that it is driven by stakeholders, communities, other people. And it was a comment I think that was also made at the first presentation of the day by the Minister. I'd actually like to ask Agustín Costa at BCG. Augusta, can you talk about Chile and water resources at the moment? How complex are you seeing the situation in Chile?
Thank you, Andrew, and good morning to everyone. Yeah, I think that as Thomas exposed, there are several ways to manage the water consumption and some game changers like sulfide leaching that can change the process. I think that if we take a step back though, and we see what mining was in Chile 10 years ago and how it has evolved, one of the most significant changes has been the reduction in use of continental waters and the use of desalinated water. And actually, if you see the way it has evolved over the last decade, the use of desalinated water has grown 39% year on year since 2010. And it's still not even half of water consumption in mining in Chile, but it is expected to reach at least 43% by 2030. So there you have a big resource to at least stop the reliance on continental waters. And I think that's an important lever to achieve better sustainability. The challenge though is that it's on two very important things. One is, of course, every new project in Chile in mining will require desalinated water. It's unlikely that they will get rights to continental waters. Actually, ongoing operations will likely get their continental water rights decreased and will require more desalinated water, which makes it more complex and more capex intensive. But that's a given. That's how the game is going to be going forward. But I think that the most important challenge facing Chile right now and the use of desalinated water is around regulation. There is a project, a piece of legislation that has not yet been passed. It's still a project, but that would mean that desalinated water can be deemed a national asset and required for public service and public use, which would of course be quite a setback for investment in those areas. That coupled with the complexities, increasing complexities going forward of achieving maritime concession to extract water and the dealings with fisheries, for instance, that will make it more complex going forward.
It's very interesting. And it struck me as well that as you move to desal water and you remove that pressure from continental water, you then also put some pressure back onto power and carbon and renewables as well. But there's lots of different parts of that puzzle. I'm going to come back to John Stanton. John, water is clearly a big issue in Chile, but you're a global business. Can you see areas outside of Chile where water is also a major pressure?
Yeah, absolutely. We guess that of all the mines around the world, probably almost up to 50%, probably just slightly lower, but close to 50% operate in water-stressed regions such as Chile. And so in all of those parts of the world, then, we're looking for similar solutions, which, as Thomas said, is about trying to eliminate water, drive dry processing as far as possible, but also where water is still necessary, come up with innovative ways of handling it so that you have, i.e. circularity, a closed loop system of recovery, so that you're not drawing additional water. So that's quite a thrust of technology for us. But then, in the other half of the mines around the world, there's probably too much water. Just over in Brazil, for example, in South America, the issue is the other way around. So, there it's how do you get the water out, manage the water more efficiently. Obviously goes into areas such as tailings management, which is a big safety and waste issue for the industry, which requires, I think, just as much focus as we need to focus on saving water in the water stressed regions of the world. So again, our thrust there is around how we can help our customers very cost effectively, efficiently dewater tailings, and actually create not a waste but a byproduct that can be used for backfilling or other construction methods that is a pumpable paste essentially. So it's all about water, but yeah, it's a very different issue in other parts of the world. And as I said at the outset, it's probably 50-50 scarcity and the other 50% too much and requires completely different solutions.
Very interesting. I'm going to shift to another topic that's come out of your presentations and some of the earlier discussion this morning as well. And this is the issue of digitization and automation. And this is one thing I think that's been accelerated naturally by the stresses that COVID has put on organizations. So I'll direct a question to Thomas at FLSmidth again. Thomas, you talked about how digitization was very central for miners and certainly for the next stage of productivity. What are the main benefits in your view that digital can deliver the most benefits to copper miners?
Yes, you know that we have since 2019 what we call the Mission Zero, that we promised the world that we will deliver in mining and other industries where we act, technology, what we can influence to get our customers into sustainability down to zero, no matter if it's carbonization, water utilization, and so on. This is not to achieve without artificial intelligence and digitalization, to make that clear. It's no way to do it without. So for us, it's an enabler. On top of it, we saw it with the pandemic. It's a new way of working. I think the pandemic, with all the negatives, actually brought us 5 years ahead in digitalization. I always joke around, if every of our customer on our own side would have so much digital knowledge as we have now with all the video conferencing and what the private people are doing, we would be 1 year ahead of that what we have today. So there's a lot what we can do more, and what we do we can prove. As an example, when we talk about water management, dry stack tailings, it is not only to filtrate tailings and then to bring them in or to mix them up and refill. It's actually starting in the pit to analyze where the ore and which kind of ore comes and how much water I can reduce. Every mining mineral processing guy knows, is when you look throughout the whole process, you can optimize permanently. It's the so-called debottlenecking. And that with a digital system which learns itself and set up the process before any human really interfere, is actually the greatest what you can see. We have some of these products. We deal with 50 million data sets per day. And it's amazing. It's amazing what you can see, what software can help us to improve processes.
Very interesting. I guess the other issue is not only in operating costs, but also in capital execution and capital projects, which has really plagued the industry in terms of delivery. I'm going to come back to Simon at Worley. Simon, in your presentation, you talked about lean IPD and things like a 30% improvement in project delivery, which is a major change. Can you explain how those kind of efficiencies are gained?
Sure, thanks, Andrew. The first point to make is, as Thomas mentioned, it's all enabled, I guess, through the digital environment, which we're all moving towards now. But the efficiencies themselves are harnessed through, effectively, it's going back to doing what we did when I first joined the mining industry, 25 or so years ago, in looking at the way in which we pull our projects together, both in development and delivery, and looking for the streamlined process. How do we truncate those schedules based upon, we've got a metals demand in the market, which I talked about in my presentation, which we now, as an industry, we need to meet. So we've got a tailwind in that regard. And how do we look at our efficiencies of our processes and what we call breakthrough project delivery to deliver different outcomes? And it fundamentally is looking at the development chain of what we do and paralleling activities or bringing decisions forward as much as we can. If we take for a normal comminution circuit for, say, a copper concentrator, we don't need to spend 9 months getting a precise specification on some of the key equipment. We know what we need. So rather than being held to a procurement-driven process that tends to dictate some of the schedule steps that we take, we look to disrupt and bring some of those key players into the mix from the ecosystem much earlier in order to drive front-end advantage on the schedule. So as you said, where we apply it, we've got measures on projects in Australia where the application of this approach has delivered those 30%. It's time to first metal savings. There are some key decisions that obviously need to be made along the way, some of which might have an incremental capital cost, but you redeem that and orders of magnitude more than that by speed of metal to market. And in a rising market, you can see, I think, where the advantage is. Some tailwind that we I guess expect from, as a corollary of that though, is there's always that, well, we've done this for 20 years now, why would we change to a completely different way? Or there's also that not invented here scenario, which tend to be hurdles we have to clear, but it's demonstrable in terms of the value that can be created when we look at the project development and delivery pipeline differently. And as I say, there's evidence beyond what we've achieved to suggest that as an industry, we probably need to look at this differently if we're to reduce the gestation of a copper project from, say, 17 years from discovery to first metal to something that's more realistic for what the world needs, driven by the energy transition at the moment.
Conscious of time, we don't have a huge amount of time, but I do want to come back on this issue to Augustin, actually, because there was a very interesting presentation by your colleague on this issue, and you talked about the issue of advanced analytics and machine learning and its impact on productivity. Can you give a summary of why you think that's so critical?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Andrew. So I think that there's basically 3 reasons why advanced analytics within the process of digitalization in mining and automation is becoming quite critical. The first one is, if you think from a perspective of return on assets, data is an extremely valuable asset that miners already have, and that in one that they have been investing significantly over the past couple of years to have more and more of through sensors and through better capabilities to store data. So from a return on assets perspective, is a critical lever to pull. The second one is that it's an opportunity for both efficiency and value in the short term. For instance, with our advanced analytics arm at BCG, we've been able to work with miners, delivering in flotation cells improved recovery of copper, which means less copper going into the tailings dam. And that is not just from the topic of our panel, not just efficiency, but also more fine copper production using the same resources. And finally, it's a way to start building on some of the topics that Thomas mentioned on the integrated operations using artificial intelligence. That is built case by use case, and being able to connect those, leveraging the info from the mine all the way to the end of the plant.
Thank you for that. And look, unfortunately, I am getting a sign that we are actually running very tight on time. Apologies that we couldn't spend a little bit more time on some of those issues. I would like to take this opportunity for thanking all of our presenters today and our panelists for such an interesting discussion. My last comment is I'd like to introduce our next CEO vignette from Peter Kuklieski, President and CEO of Hudbay Minerals. That's coming next. And I'd like to thank all our panelists for their time today. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thanks a lot.